Ah yes, St. Louis, the home to our nation's capital, the iconic Walt Disney World, and the NFL's most successful football team, the Patriots. Well, almost. We were so close. Take a look at some of the things that were nearly part of St. Louis. Number 1. After the success of opening Disneyland in California, Walt Disney, who grew up in Missouri, set his eyes on opening up a new Walt Disney Park in St. Louis. This park had really solid plans to be built right next to Busch Stadium. The design was all drawn up. But speaking of the stadium, August Busch, the owner of the beer empire Anheuser-Busch, he started to butt heads with Walt Disney. August was very adamant that his beer was essential in respecting the drinking culture of St. Louis, and he demanded that Anheuser-Busch beer be sold in the park. Walt Disney, who was very careful about maintaining the family fun image of his theme parks, he was very against it and didn't allow alcohol in any of his parks, which is very ironic now because you can spend $200 easy drinking around the world at Epcot and Disney World Orlando. It has been suggested that this rivalry was the sole reason Walt Disney pulled his plans for a St. Louis Disney World. Because the night before the final paperwork was supposed to be signed, August Busch, at a banquet that everyone was at, well, he stood up and said, "Any man that thinks he can open and make success of any amusement park and not sell beer or hard liquor ought to have his head examined." Yeah, so the paperwork didn't get signed. But a more likely reason for Walt Disney leaving would be it wouldn't be as profitable for him unless St. Louis agreed to foot the bill for an enormous amount of building the park. So now the park is in Orlando. Number 2. After the American Civil War, it was very obvious that the US was expanding extremely quick from coast to coast, and the capital being in Washington, D.C., all the way over here. St. Louisans described it as a very distant place on the outskirts of the country, with very little power or prestige. St. Louis was after all nearing its golden age, growing to be the 4th largest city in America. It was the place where everything was happening at the time. It was the center of the world's attention with the first American Olympics and the World's Fair. It made sense that out of all this vast land, it should be considered as a more geographically central capital for the US government. DC at the time was described as too dirty, too muddy, too swampy, and it was swarmed with mosquitoes. This proposal was introduced in Congress 3 times and was eventually voted on. The East Coast congressmen thought it was a joke and it would be easily shot down, but were surprised on the support because it almost got half the votes. But still, it failed to pass the vote in 1868. And number 3, St. Louis was up for a bid on an NFL expansion team at the beginning of the 90s, and they started building a stadium for a team they would call the Stallions. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out as Carolina and Jacksonville got franchises instead, but they continued building the stadium. The Patriots owner was having some financial trouble at the time, and he sold the team to James Orthwein, who was a member of the Anheuser-Busch family. He immediately made his intentions known that he was moving the team to St. Louis and play at the newly constructed stadium. One problem though, he didn't own the Patriots stadium. That would be Robert Kraft, who refused to let James out of the lease agreement for the stadium to allow them to relocate. Eventually, Kraft bought the remainder of the team to keep the Patriots in Massachusetts. But the LA Rams relocated to St. Louis shortly after. And if you see my shirt, you know how that worked out. Check back into my page for more St. Louis content.